Hi, welcome to SPE Live and today's show, SPE Presidents Talk Succession and Transition. It is great to be back with you all. My name is Nils Corkerson-Lowe. It's my great pleasure to be your host for today. We hope you've all had a good week and looking forward to the weekend. Next week is SPE's first virtual ATCE, Annual Technical Conference. And it's a big occasion for SPE, a lot of very high quality technical presentations, panel discussions and keynotes, all in an incredibly accessible virtual environment. The annual meeting is also the point where SPE presidents hand over the baton to the successor. In this case, Shauna Noonan handing over to Tom Blasingame. It is my honor to have both here in the SPE Live studio today. So if you're new to SPE Live, check us out on social media, #SPE Live, or find us on SPE.org. SPE Live is in part made possible by sponsorship from the SPE Foundation. Now, if you have comments and questions you want to share with us and ask our guests, Shauna and Tom, then please use the social media chat. Type in your questions. We'll be reading your comments and questions as we go. Repost us and tag us on social media so people who may be interested in today's broadcast can join in and see us all. So joining us today are two very special guests, the SPE Presidents, Shauna Noonan and Tom Blasingame. Shauna Noonan, 2020 SPE President, an exceptional president in an exceptional year. Director of Artificial Lift Engineering at Oxy, industry veteran and petroleum engineer expert with senior roles at Oxy, ConocoPhillips and Chevron. Tom Blasingame, incoming 2021 SPE President, world-renowned reservoir engineering, petroleum engineering, and unconventional resource expert and academician. He is a professor at Texas A&M. Shauna, Tom, welcome to SPE Live.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to reside.
Thanks very much for having us, Nils.
Oh, it's great to have you here. Now, SPE ATCE is next week, the big event on SPE's calendar, all the more so given the COVID-19 situation and the event now being fully virtual. It's the point in the year where the SPE presidents transition. So Shauna, you're going to hand over to Tom, and this is all happening on Member Monday, so early next week. It's been a tumultuous year for the industry. So, you know, a lot of big challenges facing both the companies within the industry and also SPE members and the wider audience. So today, hopefully we can talk a little bit about SPE, what it is and what it should be, the value of SPE to individuals and companies alike. Quick reminder to our audience, please, this is a fantastic opportunity now to ask questions of our SPE presidents, Tom and Shauna. So fingers on buzzers and keyboards, please type in your comments and questions and we will look at them as we go. So Tom, Shauna, let's begin at the beginning, I guess. What is SPE, an enabler or a resource, you know, in this current tumultuous time? Shauna, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, I'd like to say or think that it's both. In the fact that, you know, we do have all the wonderful resources in terms of all our technical content, but at the same time, we're an enabler. So we are enabling people to develop leadership skills, team building with all the opportunities that we have. We're also enabling people to get out of their comfort zone and maybe learn a different aspect about our business, or you know, reach out to a mentor through our e-mentoring program to do some self-development. So in a nutshell, I say SPE is both an enabler and a resource.
Tom, do you want to pick up on that?
Well, we had been using another word rather than enabler, and I confess I probably applied that word, and then we thought a lot about that, and that word was lifeboat, where SPE could be seen as a vehicle for us to, you know, traverse rough waters and so forth. And I think it wasn't the right analogy. I like Shauna's term enabler. It's a means for people to enhance their career skills and to stay in touch and to do things like this, communicate and to educate as well. The challenge I have in coming in, you know, as a good friend of mine said, 2020 is a year that just keeps on giving, but I think 2021 may be equally as challenging, if not more so. And I try to think of SPE as, from my childhood, this sense of the survival guide, if you want to think about it that way, from my days in Boy Scouts. And I think that may help along Shauna's line of it being an enabler and a resource as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You both mentioned, that enabler piece, and sort of, Shauna, you mentioned leadership development, mentoring, training. We've got the piece now, members in transition, so people that are between jobs, there are obviously opportunities to find assistance there within the SPE website, and also there's a job board now within the SPE website to assist people. Perhaps Shauna and Tom, you want to touch a little bit more on some of the sort of, both mentioned the career development aspects. So aside from the leadership development pieces, what about the sort of the technical development and technical knowledge? We are, after all, at our core, a technical society. Shauna, perhaps you want to share some of your experience around that.
Sure, but I also just want to add to that previous question, though, that jobs come and go, our employers change throughout our lives, but the one thing that's been consistent for me over time has been SPE and my SPE family, the community. And, so that's another thing. We talk about enabler resource, but really SPE too it's a community of my colleagues. Now, as far as the technical development, I myself have had an entire career in the technical path, and I would have not achieved the level that I have if it wasn't for SPE, because, within an operating company or even a service company, you can you learn based on what the resources you have on hand. But once you start understanding or learning about what other people are doing in other parts of the globe, in other disciplines, that's really when you start to develop and get a lot stronger technically. So my background being artificial lift, it was my involvement in the artificial lift committees. Now we got this great technical section, and it's again developing not only that level of knowledge that's here, but it's also developing that network of people that if you don't have the answer to that question, someone in your network through SPE, you can reach out to, and they will provide that answer for you.
Absolutely. Tom, do you want to build on that a little bit, perhaps?
I was kind of intimidated by this because, frankly, my career in SPE started, I guess, approximately 1983, and I didn't really get involved until I started writing papers in 85 and 86. And Shauna reminded me that my first paper delivery, I think it was actually in Midland in March of 86, and it scared the living daylights out of me. I remember being so nervous. And which Midland's pretty easy place to do a paper, by the way, if anyone wants to know. But the thing about these relationships that Shauna implied is that the strongest professional and in some cases personal relationships I have right now are derived from my 30 plus years within the Society of Petroleum Engineers, and sometimes these relationships strengthen and they come and go maybe as needs happen and so forth. But one of the things I was going to mention, the younger generation probably doesn't realize that we were young at one time. And I literally remember my first SPE service assignment was in 1990. I was on a committee where after the season ended and a new chairperson had to be chosen, the oldest guy in the group came to me and said, "You should be the next chairperson." And I don't think I had a panic attack, but I think I realized that they wanted to enable us, the younger generation, to take over. And I never had a bad relationship with an older member in that context. They were always willing to step aside and let us take the reins. And I'd say the same thing to this younger generation as well. Of course, you have to do your homework, and you have to really, that was a heavy load for me actually at the time, but you have to do the heavy lifting as well. So I'm pretty comfortable that SPE will continue to be that kind of a mechanism where it takes a person who's willing to make a contribution and gives them ample opportunity to do so. Certainly throughout the totality of my service career, that's been the case. Anytime there was an opportunity and I raised my hand, people said, "Hey, why not? If he wants to volunteer." And I absolutely feel the same way. If someone wants to volunteer for something, we'll find something for them to do.
Thanks, Tom. So, yeah, very important message there. SPE is a volunteer organization. The content is by the volunteers, for the membership. So you both resonating that really powerful message about community, professional relationships, networking, and how that really supports us within the industry. I just want to quickly turn to some audience questions, because I just want to pick up some important pieces here related to that support mechanism. So first of all, just on the side, Fasil Al-Janabi on LinkedIn, he was just asking about technical papers. We share technical papers through One Petro. Is it possible to get presentations? Yes, you can find presentations in One Petro. So that's just a quick answer there to you. Quick shout out. Further down, we started getting some more questions, particularly about the challenges the oil and gas industry will face in the coming future. That's from Joe Nadir Ayub. But also, more importantly, another question from Lonku Emmanuel on Facebook. His question is, how can you assure young African students going into petroleum engineering that there is a future? I mean, it really comes back to oil and gas place in this energy transition. So, where are we in terms of supporting our members and our industry with this difficult time? I mean, everybody has this question.
Yeah, and let me start off with that, because I think there's almost two parts to that question. One is, one of the biggest misunderstanding that is out there is that the clean energy transition means that we're transitioning away from oil and gas, which is not the case. Again, it's a clean energy transition because all forms of energy are going to be needed to meet the global demand. However, all forms of that energy has to be cleaner. And the other misnomer is, peak oil. It's misunderstood that means it's now a cliff. There will be no demand. But the data is out there. The IEA just put out their forecast, their global outlook. So many other entities. And again, oil and gas is going to be here for many decades to come. So there's that future. There is a future, a continued future for our industry. Now, when I say there is probably two parts to that, was are there going to be jobs? And it's been a concern of mine in that there's parts of this world or countries that are graduating more petroleum engineering students than their own economies can support. And so what that does is that floods an international market of graduates looking for jobs. And it's times like this when countries have closed borders, companies are they're restricting hiring to within their own countries. Then that does jeopardize the future of some of these graduates, depending where they're coming from. But a great example too is Russia. The placement for the students that are graduating in Russia is pretty much 100%, because there's an economy in a country that is able to match the supply demand from the students. And now, the king of students, I'll deflect that that answer to Tom Blasingame.
I actually thought you were doing a better job than me. I was going to say that, when you read the chat and when you talk to young people, there is an anxiety about what the future looks like. And, we, the older generation, had a pretty rough time. And whenever you talk about this, the younger generation generally rolls their eyes and says, we don't want to hear about that anymore. We're going through the worst period. And you are going through the worst period in our history in many ways. And we respect that and we understand that. But the growth of consumption of energy is going on unabated. And as Shauna pointed out, all ALL of the projections still have oil and gas as a majority of energy usage well into the 2050 kind of time frame. And all of these projections have underestimated the resiliency of oil and gas as both fuels and as feedstocks and other things. And we have to factor that in. If you're asking me as SPE president, how do I see SPE's role in energy transition? Well, we are energy transition. We are what it will enable energy transition. We are the process, the resource that allows energy transition to occur. We don't have the luxury of waiting to develop. We have to operate at full capacity. I'd also comment that given the current situation, the oil and gas industry is one of the few that has been completely resilient and functional. Admittedly, demand is down, but as we know, with exploration and operations being less, there will be a demand increase, not a surge, but it will return, and then there will be a subsequent follow-up demand increase. Where's that supply going to come from? There is simply no way that other resources are going to take over that. Now, if you want to diversify your career and perhaps major in more than one subject or get advanced degrees, that's fine. I fully support that. I'm an educator. That's my job. But I think also you have to decide whether you're going to commit to this industry. And if you are going to commit to this industry, there will be employment. There will be challenging locations. I've read the question about, and Shauna addressed this as well, that there will be locations where jobs will be less available and it will be more difficult. But ultimately, a petroleum engineering degree has been transportable, since its inception. So I don't see that a person with a very strong technical background, a strong drive to perform, is going to ultimately have difficulty finding employment and delivering in this industry. I know that sounds like a little bit too optimistic of a message given the current situation, but it's the reality. If you're willing to invest, I think you're going to be successful as a petroleum engineer.
Oh,
And
but
Thanks.
I do want to add, though, again, too, it's clean energy transition. And the one thing that SPE is doing a lot of right now is providing the platform for people either to be discussing technologies or methods that oil and gas can be cleaner. We're experts in the subsurface, and we know how to inject CO2. So there's a lot of efforts that SPE is championing when it comes to carbon capture and sequestration.
Thanks, Shauna. Thanks, Tom. So, yeah, I'm just looking at the audience comments and questions. There's obviously a lot of comments and questions around energy transition. There's some anxiety, which the pair of you have already addressed in terms of, hey, oil and gas is here to stay for some considerable time, given the forecast growth in energy consumption globally. So, there are some challenges ahead of us in terms of how we maintain a clean industry and become cleaner, as Shauna just mentioned, with CCUS and methane type technologies. So just switching back to how we can address some of these concerns and anxieties through SPE being a resource. So how can members and non-members become members and use SPE as a resource? What is that? How do people interact with SPE? Tom, maybe you want to pick up on that.
Let me set this up for Shauna, since she's lived it for the last 2 years, and I did live it for a while before that when I was on the board. But I think you're about to see an avalanche of resources within SPE, that is both content and services and other things. And as we transition to our new platforms for delivery via the web, via the app, and so on, and again, Shauna's going to be more, she's going to speak better to that than I can, but I know the nuts and bolts side of it, which is we have an enormous volume of content that is available now, perhaps not in the perfect format or form for people to digest it, but I can assure you, on my watch at least, my goal is to enable that comment to be delivered to anyone who wants it any way they want it. Now, the member proposition is that we have to have membership support for these things, corporate and individual. And, as a user, you have to recognize that we have to invest in these things to provide them. I'm very focused. If I were to say in one word, what would I want to do, or one phrase, what would I want to do as SPE president, it would be to make all of that technology available to anyone who wants it at any time. But there is a cost of that. And I'm not trying to say that, there's going to be a coin box on top of it or something like that, but there is a cost of that in both resources and financial as well as time. And Shauna, I want to turn this back to you, because I think you have a more passionate and concise message about the member proposition than I do at this point. Mine will evolve over time, but my focus really is to say, we are going to provide these things. You're going to be responsible for consuming them, but you're also going to be responsible for helping us to enable them, that is to fund them and to provide them to you. So with that, I'll hand off to Shauna.
Okay, you had two topics there, so let me first address the first one. You mentioned the content in regards to the energy transition, but more importantly, we've established many communities. These communities, for example, are in the form of technical sections. So we have a CCUS technical section. We have a sustainability technical section. And within all of these, there are message boards. I shouldn't say message boards, but a lot of great conversations daily between members, either wanting to learn about that topic or want to vent. The big thing is, I would say maybe 8-10 years ago, you would not see many people within our industry having a discussion about the future role of oil and gas, like the energy transition, educating the public on our role. And that's one thing that SPE has done very well, is creating that conversation toolkit and really educating our own members so we can not only have that discussion amongst ourselves, but also, again, with the public. Now, the second part of Tom's issue was the value proposition of being a member. And again, I want an SPE member to feel that they're special because they have a membership. And it goes beyond just having that little member flag when you actually go to the event. Having a lot more tools, content that's exclusive to you. This is why I love the Member Monday that's going to be happening on October 26th. It's finally, we're having events that normally only ATCE registrants could participate in. Now this is actually available to any SPE member, whether you view it live or on demand later, around the globe. It's being more inclusive, as well as, again, creating all these communities. People, we tend to get together with people that have a common, whether it's a discipline or a concern or just wanting to have a conversation. And that's what SPE has really done to enable, is create all these communities. And you don't just have to belong to one. As a member, you can join them all. I think we have 13 technical sections, and I'm actually a member of them all, not only for self-development, but also just for awareness what's going on in the other aspects of our industry.
Yeah, thanks, Shauna. That's an important message to bring out there. And it neatly brings me back to, let's talk for a moment about sort of the volunteer aspect of SPE, which is really at the heart of it. And to everybody out there, you get out of SPE what you put in. It's very volunteer focused. And just to a question here, taking up from a LinkedIn question from Sarah Al-Shaban. Can university graduates have a direct circulation of SPE news and vacant positions that we might offer? So really, SPE is a technical society. We do have assistance for members in transition. There is a job board, but it's not a job posting site. Really, SPE, the power of SPE, as Shauna and Tom have both mentioned, is that community, that relationship. And this is where you both build your competency and your network of people that will allow you to establish yourself as a technical professional and, gain jobs within the industry. So Shauna, Tom, I just want to come back and sort of talk a little bit about what is needed to be involved in SPE, like a volunteer, the resourcefulness that you have both experienced and seen through your time being associated with SPE and working with SPE.
Let me start off with that. My early involvement in SPE was for my self-development, whether it was communication skills, technical writing skills with doing papers, whether it was developing leadership skills by serving on committees. Because that's one thing too that I don't think many, especially young professionals, realize is, if you want to end up being that team leader or have a management role in a company, typically in order for you to be qualified for that, you had to have already developed and demonstrated some sense of leadership skills. But as a young engineer, typically you don't get those opportunities very early on in an operating or service company. And this is where SPE is fantastic, because we have so many leadership positions for our young professionals that you can hone those skills within SPE and then use that to demonstrate back to your employer why you're qualified to be that next team leader. And that's what I had used too. I actually, even though I may not have been the technical expert, for example, on a topic for a committee, if you build a fantastic team and you start developing those leadership skills, then that actually it's a win-win. You not only get the leadership, but because now the people that you surrounded yourself with is also raising you up technically. And then also on the career ladder for many companies, especially on the technical career ladder, there's a point where you have to demonstrate you're recognized as an industry expert. Well, SPE is one of the best ways to do that through publications showing that you've been either recognized with awards or even selected to serve on some of these more exclusive committees. So that's how SPE not only helped me, but again, I want to demonstrate to our members how, some people use this term volunteer, and volunteer to me is, personally, I don't use that term because, again, a lot of what I did, my goal was, again, for my self-development. However, now, especially as SPE president, obviously it's a lot of giving back, and then it's that sense of volunteerism. But Tom, I know because you had a different career path, so you might have a different take on that question.
Oh, thank you, Shauna. I think everyone has to realize that although my career path was different, I was thinking as Shauna was speaking that the 80s were pretty good to me. I was writing a lot of papers, and then the 90s, my career, I became a young academic and was focused on writing papers, but not so much getting involved. But then I did get involved in education colloquia and education-related things, and that was really good for me. It gave me exposure, and it gave me confidence of dealing with people. Things were easier then to get involved with. Usually it was by word of mouth. You connected with someone, and then what happened to me, and I don't know if the same thing happened to Shauna, but is in the late 1990s, and she's a lot younger than me, so I won't say that, but I dealt with part of my career that was really intense in an administrative role. But in the early 2000s, I had some time on my hands, and I just never said no. If someone said, we need an ATW in Malaysia, will you chair it? If we need a function in Mexico, will you do it? If we need a function in Peru, will you do it? Sure, and again, times were a little bit easier then, but I always did what Shauna said as well. I always brought a team with me. I talked to my friends and colleagues and got them involved as well. There's a new tool now that I cannot leave this webinar without, or this SPE Live event without talking about, and that's the SPE Volunteer Portal. And I admit that I'm the typical male. I never read the directions. But if those of you really want access to volunteer opportunities, you can send me an email. I already am drowning in it. That's fine. I'm happy to try to help with that. But what would be better is if you went to the volunteer portal, and it's www.spe.org/volunteer. It's pretty easy. I can assure you that your case will be vetted. In most of the appointments that I made this year actually came through the volunteer portal. A lot of them were re-ups, but if you put your information in the volunteer portal and you explain what your experience is and so forth, somebody's going to respond to you. May not be an opportunity the first year, and you need to understand that. A lot of times I know Shauna and I get people saying, hey, I want to be a committee chair. Committee chair is kind of like being the senior pilot on an airplane. You don't walk in from the passenger section and become a committee chair. You have to build that experience and that expertise. I think I'll stop there and hand it back to Shauna for a second and see if she has anything to add. Again, our career paths were slightly different, but I think I see so many similarities now. I'm beginning to wonder if there's a theme here.
Well, first I would want to quick do an apology. And this is the beauty of being live and the fact that many of us are working from our homes. So I apologize for my dogs going crazy because the lawn guys are here, and I had to quit off a camera and lock them up because they were actually starting to drown me out with their barking and that. So my apologies. Also, too, again, there's been a lot of conversations around work-life balance as well. And you do also have to find that balance within opportunities within SPE. Because again, we Tom mentioned he went through a period where he didn't say no. But for myself, because, I'm a mother of two wonderful daughters, and there were times in my career too where I did have to say no because I had to find that balance, not only balance of my involvement within SPE, but as well as within work, and then also too at home being a mom. Now, I will say though, I have read most of my SPE papers while sitting, waiting for my daughters to come out of dance class, for example. So you can learn to multitask. But again, please, like, there's so many opportunities out there. But depending on what part you are in your career and what in your personal situation, again, please find that balance, because we don't want you to burn out, whether it's as an SPE contributor or even on your job. Yeah, our society is as healthy as our members are, so we need to make sure that everybody is good.
I would just want to take 1 second, Nils, and relay a quick personal story that I had very similar to Shauna. I think my daughter was 3 years old, and we were driving by the airport in College Station, which isn't hard to do. It's sort of in town. And she said, "Where are you going, Daddy?" And I said, "Nowhere." And she associated that anytime we drove by the airport, I was leaving. And Shauna, I see you smiling. I'm sure you went through something like that as well. And, the never say no approach works, but it does have an impact on your family. So please be aware of that as well. Balance yourself out. I absolutely agree with Shauna's comments on that.
Oh, thanks, Tom and Shauna. So yeah, absolutely some more powerful messages there about sort of getting involved in SPE at the section level, workshop committees, and even conference committees as you build up your competencies and your skills, and that gives you that leadership skill development as well. And more importantly, self-development. So as I said before, you get out what you put in. So it's very, very important that you have to motivate yourself and I think care for your expertise so you can able to contribute to your field of expertise, influence it, again, through participation in various committees within the SPE. That brings me really, I guess, to the next question is, what is the value of SPE to an employee or an employer? Because often we have to, I remember myself working in the industry for service companies and operators, having to justify wanting to go to a conference or a workshop and saying, this is the value to you, my employer. So Shauna, Tom, talk a little bit about that. What is the value to the individual? What is the value to an employer, an oil operating company, a service company, a university? What is that value? Shauna, perhaps you want to start.
Yeah, so one of the topics that I have when I talk to YPs is, do they understand the value that they bring? And it's all back to this concept of human capital. And when I say what they bring, I say, do you know what value you're bringing to your company or your institution right now? And if you do know the answer, does your management know the value that you bring? And so this is something, and this is not just within oil and gas, this is with any industry, again, showing not only the value of the activity that you're doing back to your employer, but even that you're doing outside. So for example, when I was serving on program committees, I would demonstrate to my employer that through the abstract selection process, I was actually learning what new technologies were coming out in the industry, or even what our competitors were doing months in advance of any of that becoming public. And it would only become public if those abstracts got selected. So it was a little bit of industry recon, demonstrating the value with that. Also, too, companies and employers realize the value of having an effective network. Actually, in some of the performance assessments now, or understanding value you bring, companies are recognizing this. And when I say they're recognizing it, first hit them when we had the big crew change, and we had a lot of senior people, whether they're engineers or geoscientists, leave the industry. And when they left, they took their vast networks with them. And a lot of the younger members don't necessarily have that. And when I say stress the importance of it, you'll never know the answer to everything or know what everybody is doing all the time. But if you have a really good, effective network, and that, again, if you can demonstrate through SPE your involvement, how you've reached out and, show them how not only an engaged but an effective network you have, employers get it and they realize it and they'll support that with SPE involvement.
Fabulous. Tom, do you want to add to that from the sort of university perspective?
So, awkward moment here. We actually have a criteria now in university where you're evaluated on your influence and impact. And the awkward moment is I'm too old to where that matters for me, but when we're evaluating annual review for young faculty in particular and mid-career faculty, we're always looking for how much influence and impact they have. And certainly SPE membership and SPE participation is a big one. It's our vehicle also for publication for the most part. I know there are a lot of academics that have historically been a little frustrated with SPE's review process, which I would comment in recent years has just really become extremely streamlined. I compliment the vision and the effort of the staff on really reducing time to review. But more importantly, if we take that content outside of SPE, it's no longer in our archives, which really concerns me. But for me personally, I always found that the value to my employer was, as Shauna mentioned, the ability to see things before they happen, the ability to network, the ability to have recognition of who was doing what. I think, whatever my reputation is in terms of my networking list, it all came from SPE. And everybody says, oh, you know everybody. Well, I do know everybody who participates. If they don't participate, I'm probably not going to know them. But at the same time, I know who to call on. And I think that's the kind of thing that Shauna was also saying, is that networking gives you the ability to bring people in at any time. So from an academic perspective, it's influence and impact, but from a personal perspective, it's the ability to have that opportunity to communicate across a lot of different boundaries.
Thanks, Tom.
I do want to add there's a quality component of it. And again, I apologize for the noise in the background. I totally forgot my lawn guys were coming today, so my apologies.
I thought it was my microphone.
But again, if you're going to write a paper, make sure it's a good one. You want to be known as writing a good paper. If you're going to serve on a committee, don't just check I'm on a committee, now I can put it on my CV. You want to be known as a good contributor, because just like in our industry, just like within SPE, there are opportunities available that may not necessarily get posted, and it's based on your reputation and the value of the contributions that you bring. So again, if you're taking on these roles, just don't do it to pad your CV, because that could end up closing doors for you later, because then you establish a reputation as someone that takes up a position on a committee but doesn't actually do anything, right? So again, we're just not looking for those to volunteer, or, well, I guess not volunteer. We're just looking for people that are really going to contribute in a good quality way.
Thanks, Shauna. Thanks, Tom. So yeah, we both really emphasizing that effective network piece that's so important. So, in terms of knowledge acquisition, contributing to your area of expertise, your work environment, influencing technology, sort of the gains for employers, the sort of being, having access to technology innovations early on, business development opportunities, who's doing what. So really very effective if you develop that effective network. So really, there's a couple of questions. A question from Hakminas on LinkedIn. It comes back to, again, the value of SPE membership to the individual and to companies. How can an associate SPE member participation in various activities through a scoring system? So rather than a scoring system, Shauna and Tom, can you briefly sort of describe what are the sort of the senior volunteer positions within the SPE, the regional directors, the technical directors, the SPE president position? How do you achieve that? Briefly, what is the role and the influence those positions have on the SPE and the wider industry?
Okay, well, let's first start with the regional directors. And again, look at the roles and responsibilities of each one of these positions, and then understanding that's basically the criteria that you need to have in order to go for those positions. I know we've got the regional directors, they're working a lot with the sections and the student chapters. And to be a great candidate to become a regional director, you basically had to have served positions within a section. You have to understand how a section operates. And we do get people nominated for regional director roles that have never done any section activities whatsoever, and that makes you a poor candidate. The same on the technical directors. You can be an industry expert in a given area. However, if you have no knowledge or you've never participated in relative SPE events, that also makes you a poor candidate, because as a technical director, you are championing and developing within SPE that discipline. For example, interacting with your SPE peers. Tom, you want to talk about some of the other roles?
Sure. I was going to say that Shauna really stole my best line, and I forgot all about it, which is only write your best paper. So there, I didn't answer. I'm becoming a politician. I didn't answer the question you wanted, Nils, but I answered the question that I wanted to answer. But getting back to the board in particular, first of all, what I've noticed is there's a learning period for most board members, and they recognize that they're not representing a constituency. They're representing all of us, all of the members. That's how we're structured. So that's really important to me. And I also will tell you that collegially, they or as colleagues, they tend to take on faith, the things that are really important. I can assure you they're very aware of the situation you're in right now. Shauna described the regional directors perfectly, that they generally have extremely deep roots in the regions that they're in. They know the constituency, they know the universities, they know the service sector, they know the operating sector, and they're very well connected. And they spend their day job, for a lot of them, is actually to be the liaison for SPE into those communities. I'm very, very pleased with how effective some of those guys, or well, I should say, almost all of those people are. As Shauna mentioned, some people come less prepared to this, and I speak directly to you that if you're not prepared for a role at that level, you probably should wait until you are, or take another role. There is also, life gets in the way as well. Technical directors generally are more focused. They try to focus on their discipline and the components of their discipline and how those are integrated into the things that we do within SPE. As for other sort of regional officers and section officers and things like that, I find that those people are incredibly committed. They have a passion for serving. And one of the things that really makes me proud of this organization is people know when to step aside. They know when their time's up, and they know whenever it's time to let someone else serve. As far as becoming SPE president, I'm going to have to defer to Shauna on that one. Everybody's probably smiling and laughing. I'm here to do this job as best I can, but the reality is that SPE president is a service role for me. I fully intend to give my 329 days, blood, sweat, and tears, and that's going to be my goal. Everything that I've done up until this time prepared me for this, but I don't think anything prepared Shauna or I for the years that we've had and the year that I'll have ahead of me. So I'll step back and let Shauna comment now.
Well, and first, I want to do a couple clarifications. One is, we keep talking about establishing a network. We're not talking going out and pinging somebody on LinkedIn looking to connect. Again, it's an effective network is just not going out and just asking to connect with people, right? And that's a topic for another whole webinar. And again, too, it's I guess I just didn't say double-edged sword. There's some pluses and minuses in the fact that within our society, we have so many fantastic contributors, people that have done fantastic things, not only technically, but just as far as their commitment and what they've done within SPE. And we love to recognize, not only with the awards, but we've got the DLs, we've got the board positions. And, we have for all these programs, we have so many qualified people all the time, but we can't select all. And, unfortunately, during some of these cycles, like you may have had a fantastic DL presentation, but they only can select so many. And, you did get selected, or you ran for a board position and you really felt that you qualified and you were qualified. It's just there are, keep in mind your colleagues. We have so many strong colleagues out there that don't take it personal if you don't get selected, and try again. And please don't turn to social media and then do a rant that you think the system is rigged. The policies, the procedures, it's all politics. And it's not the case. Again, we're a society of members. We follow protocol. Members, we're colleagues. It's your colleagues that are doing these selections. There are many, whether it's awards or even for SPE president, where, I ran and I did not get selected, but the person that they selected was extremely qualified. And I gave myself 24 hours to kind of feel bad for myself. But then it's like, you know what? That is still a goal that I want. I'm going to try again. Right. And again, you have to watch too with the social media. Again, just like within SPE or an industry, being a social media influencer is not necessarily something we look for on a CV. We actually want true contributors, like getting in and getting their hands dirty and just not amassing a huge following on social media. But you also have to be aware too, when people are actually turning to social media to do a rant, they're not necessarily telling the whole story. And so that's one of the, when we talk about kind of day-to-day challenges as being an SPE president, and Tom's starting to see this too, is we tend to be fighting a lot of fires, just a lot of misinformation that's going out there. Or again, just a lot of people that have taken, their paper didn't get selected for a conference, not program committee, it's all politics, there's something that's rigged. And then going back and just educating them on how, well, first of all, encouraging them that, to try again and maybe offer some constructive feedback on how they can actually be better qualified the next time they were going to submit that paper or run for that position or go for that award.
Thanks, Shauna. Thanks, Tom. So yeah, absolutely, there are some challenges certainly in being in these sort of senior volunteer post positions within the SPE. Not only do you help sort of steer the strategy of the SPE, but also you have to support and mentor and guide many of the SPE members. It kind of brings to mind sort of an old US sitcom, Cheers. Everyone knows your name, but to get there, you have to put the work in. You have to gain the recognition, to gain the influence within not only the SPE, but within the industry itself. And on that point, I just want to quickly turn to just next week. Let's look ahead to ATCE very quickly next week. Big moment for SPE in the calendar year. It's where you two hand off from one to the other. Shauna, you hand off to Tom. What are some of the highlights for the pair of you next week? We're in a virtual environment. What are some of the highlights to look forward to next week?
If I can go first, Shauna, let me make a couple of quick comments and then hand off to you on organizational matters for the ATC. I think it'd be better if you closed it, because what I'm going to say is very specific. What I've noticed is that the presentations are much better for the like the URTech or the LACPEC or the other meetings, because people are practicing them and they're submitting their best presentation. The discussions are generally much more succinct. People are more engaged. They've viewed the material beforehand. They're more prepared. I like that a lot about this virtual environment. I'm not, I'm not young. I'm not old. I mean, I'm young at heart, but I still prefer a physical environment. Many of you probably will. You'll be a little intimidated by a virtual environment, but that's no excuse. Get on, take a look, get involved, get engaged. We have a ton of really good panels. We have a ton of really good content. And most of all, it's being prepared. All of this was being done for you. And, we had a decision point where we had to decide whether or not we were even going to do ATCE Not that that was ever a viable option or something that we were seriously considering not doing, but we had to vet that. We thought that the value of this experience far outweighed any of the challenges. I think you will too. And lastly, for me at least, there is no straight line in life. There's lots of curves. There's a few steps back. There might even be some circles. And when Shauna was talking about what it takes to be a leader, you have to recognize that being a leader means doing what it takes. It means paying your dues. For me, it always meant starting at the bottom and sometimes staying there a lot longer than I ever anticipated and delivering. If you want to really make an impact on this industry, you must deliver. Write your best paper, give your best talk, participate, be your best committee member. If your name is on that committee roster and you're not doing something, if I have anything to say about it, you will not be on that committee next year. So with that, I will hand it back to Shauna, and she will close with a smile.
Well, and a comment as well in the fact that we've done some initial surveys on the registrants for ATCE this year, and I am thrilled that we have many first timers attending ATCE. And when I say first timers, it was they weren't able to travel or afford the expense of doing an in-person event. And so now we're going to have just a lot of fresh faces, albeit virtually, assessing our content. And again, too, ATCE, we cover absolutely all aspects of the industry, whether it's in papers, panels. Also, too, you already heard me talk about Member Monday, but I'm also pleased, especially for those that they want to have a good grounding and understanding on geopolitics affecting our industry, as well as kind of like the future of oil and gas. And that's author Daniel Yergin. He just came out with his book called The New Map, and it is fantastic. He is a Pulitzer winning author of The Prize and The Quest. And he is actually going to be our keynote speaker on Member Monday, free for all SPE members, talking about these aspects. So it's a great education. Now, one of the things that we're doing in the virtual aspect too is there is going to be a networking area, but this time we're going to have to learn how to network and reach out to one another a little bit different, as well as with the exhibitors. Again, the exhibitors too really, they enable us to be able to afford to put on these in-person events and try and keep the costs as low as we can. And exhibitors they need to see that they're getting that engagement in the virtual space. So please not only visit the networking area and network with others, but please also to go out to our exhibitors and engage and demonstrate that they can do some effective marketing and reach out to customers in that virtual space, because that is absolutely going to be key on how actually SPE proceeds forward with their events. And then finally, your feedback. There are so many different platforms out there, and we picked the one we thought would be best for ATCE. And we really need that feedback, because the virtual events, they're not going to go away once COVID-19, everybody's vaccinated against COVID-19. We realize we're able to reach out to so many more people because of it. You may have heard the term hybrid events, but again, to make sure that virtual component of it is of value to people, we need to hear that feedback on exactly what you need, because we will develop based on your feedback.
Oh, thank you, Shauna, Tom, very powerful. So yeah, I just want to reiterate what you both said. So first of all, the accessibility. So ATCE next week in virtual format, very, very, very accessible. Has some really high quality technical presentations, panel sessions, keynotes. We know we're going to see a really high quality Q&A sessions around all of that. An amazing opportunity for effective networking, as you've both been talking about throughout this SPE Live. So really encourage people to check out ATCE, get involved, participate, and get real value out of it. Really, we're out of time, Shauna, Tom. It's been fantastic talking to the pair of you. I think what you've conveyed across to the audience has been really useful and powerful about the value of SPE, how to get involved, and the value of SPE to individuals, to companies, to the industry. So Thank you very much. Any closing remarks as we leave?
I want to close with a quote, and it's that quote of give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach him how to fish, you feed him for life. And that's really what SPE is. We are trying to enable and teach one another to have sustainable careers. We teach you how to make yourself a better candidate for a job, for example, as opposed to just reaching out and giving you one. I mentioned that because I'm sure it's probably happened already in the comments. A lot of people out there, they're posting, hey, can you help me get a job? Again, too, that's what SPE is. We're trying to provide that framework for your career to be successful and sustainable.
Thank you, Shauna. Tom, closing remark.
I think I'll do the same as Shauna and give a quote. And I apologize. This is an American president. Everybody's probably taking a deep sigh. No, it's not the current one. It's Theodore Roosevelt. And he said, do what you can with what you have right now. And that means that use whatever resources you have to achieve your objectives. And, you know, if you want to wait for something to happen, it's not going to happen. If you want to complain that you don't have the resources to do something, that's not going to be a successful tact either. You have an enormous, from students to fossils like myself, you have an enormous body of information in our technical society. You have an enormous networking capability. I'm not suggesting that any of this will be easy. And, you know, I'm reading the comments as they're coming along. I feel your pain, and I don't mean that as a flippant comment. I feel the weight of all of our members. But we're in this together. We're going to succeed together. And remember what Roosevelt said, Theodore, and that is do what you can with what you have right now. If you're going to wait, it's not going to be a successful strategy. So let's get busy. Let's get to work.
Thank you,
I thought
Tom.
it was interesting. Tom referred to himself as a fossil, but Tom, fossils feed our industry and they feed the planet. So thank you very much for your fossil contribution.
Thank you very much. I fossilized.
Shauna, Tom, thank you very much. It's been fantastic talking to the pair of you. Really powerful messages. And just to really end, you know, next week, become part of that whole society, that whole movement. Join ATCE, get involved, do what you can with what you have. ATCE is that perfect opportunity. Once again, Tom, Shauna, thank you very much. Thank you to the audience for all your comments and questions. You've been fantastic. Thank you also to Jason, our production crew, and Asha, and also to the SPE Foundation for making SPE Live possible. So thank you, and have a great day, everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
I encourage you to join me and other industry leaders at the opening general session, where we'll have a discussion on how our industry will continue to lead the global energy transition with confidence and optimism. Our industry has managed energy transition since its beginning, and with each new cycle, we build a stronger foundation of expertise in technology, engineering, and manufacturing, and all at a global scale. Nobody understands this challenge better than you. So please be sure to mark your calendar and come ready to gain insights into one of the most important conversations that's shaping our industry today. I look forward to seeing you there.